All right, this is warm-up number 9. So it's about the law of detachment and also the law of syllogism. Okay, here is the law of detachment in symbolic form. So if you have a hypothesis, this is lowercase p, that's leading to a specific conclusion, okay, so we've got an if-then statement. If something happens, if event A happens, then event B happens. And then let's say you know that the first event happens, well, you know where that's going to lead, so you can make a conclusion that this would happen. That's the law of detachment. It's kind of weird using the symbolic form, but it's really some common sense. So let's try it out with this. If Gandalf practices, then he will perfect the spell. So we know practice leads to perfect, right? And then it says, hey, Gandalf practices. So we know what that's going to lead to, right? We know him practicing leads to him perfecting the spell. So he practices, then we can draw a new conclusion that that Gandalf perfects the spell. So that's going to be my new conclusion. Okay, so this is what we're looking for here, or something along those lines. Okay, so it's a really simple idea, but it also can be, it's easy to mix up. Okay, on this second problem, it says if Samwise gets detention, then he will get grounded. And then it says Samwise gets grounded. So a lot of people say, oh, Samwise got grounded, he must have got detention. Okay, but here's the problem with this. Getting detention is the hypothesis, okay? And then getting grounded is the conclusion. So we've got our conditional statement. Getting detention leads to getting grounded. But then in the second sentence, it says Samwise gets grounded. This is the conclusion of the original statement, okay? So just because my original hypothesis leads to that conclusion, that doesn't mean this conclusion leads back to the original hypothesis. We don't know where that leads, okay? So we actually can't use the law of detachment here, okay? So this is not possible. And just kind of thinking about this, you know, let's say this is you. If you get detention, let's say your parents ground you every time. Now, if you got grounded, well, that's not the only thing you could do to get grounded, right? There are other things you could do. You could cheat on a math test, God forbid. Okay, but there are other ways that you can get grounded besides getting detention. We don't know that Samwise getting grounded here came from him getting detention. Maybe he got detention. Maybe he got grounded for another reason. Okay, so these two problems are meant to illustrate how this works and also how it doesn't work. But how, you know, there's a common mistake on number 2 that people try to use the law of detachment, but it just doesn't work. Okay, law of syllogism is a lot like the transitive property of equality. Okay, so this is if event A leads to event B and event B leads to event C, then we can say, okay, well, event A is ultimately going to lead to event C, okay? And that's kind of how the law of syllogism, I didn't use the P's and Q's, but it's this kind of an idea, okay? So it's going to be split into different sentences usually, okay? So this says if Pippin gets an A, then he will go to the movies, okay? So gets an A, go to the movies, okay? So getting an A leads to movies. I'm just making a short version of that first sentence, okay? And then we have Pippin, if Pippin goes to the movies, then he will eat popcorn, okay? So the second sentence, movies leads to popcorn. Okay, so if we look at this story, we can say, okay, if he gets an A, he'll go to the movies. If he goes to the movies, he'll eat popcorn. So getting an A is the beginning of our story here. We know at the end of the story is what is going to happen. It's going to lead to him eating popcorn, okay? So that means we can kind of cut out the middle part here. These parts match up. These parts match up, so we can take the other two parts and write a new conditional. We can say, if Pippin gets an A, then he will eat popcorn. Okay? All right, so let's look at this next example. It says, if Sauron stubs his toe, then he will get angry. And then if Sauron loses the ring, then he will get angry. Okay? Um, so we have stubs toe. That leads to anger. Or I'll just say angry. Okay? And then we have loses ring. Sauron is just an angry guy, I guess. Okay, so a lot of times I'll see students say, okay, if Sauron stubs his toe, then he loses the ring or something like that. Okay, this is tempting to try to use the law of syllogism. We do have these matching pieces, but the problem is if you look at this last example, the matching parts here, one of them was a conclusion and one of them was a hypothesis. That's not the case here. Okay. So you want to kind of think of it as a story. If I look at the last example, I know the first thing that happened is getting the A. And then the last thing that happened was the popcorn. So I can say, okay, the first thing is going to lead to the last thing. Now I know the last thing here is getting angry in both sentences, but I don't know what happened first, stubbing the toe or losing the ring. I can't use the law of syllogism unless my matching pieces, one of them's a hypothesis and one's a conclusion. That's just not the case here. So I'm going to have to say not possible. The law of syllogism does not work. I can't draw any new conclusions. You could draw some conclusions, but it wouldn't be using the law of syllogism. Okay, and that's it for today.